Hello, and welcome back to the Automation Capitals project. As you can no doubt see from being out here in the desert, today's episode will not be within Old Basara. I figured it was time to do something a little bit different. So what I'll be working on is Dalluha Big Oil Inc's main production site in Basara, which I've gone ahead and marked out already. Let me just show that here. Yep. Just at least some of these massive oil reserves here. So, yeah, there really isn't much to say, so yeah, let's get started then. So of course the first thing to start with here is some kind of highway connection to, get the trucks in and out of the oil area. I figured for the roads I'd go with these kind of rural roads with no sidewalks or anything like that, since it's this kind of industrial site. It's very much having the kind of bare minimum paved road for the trucks to travel through, and just absolutely nothing special, no street lights, nothing. And yes, for the layout here, instead of a big interchange for this, I added a couple of turnarounds to the highway, which is something I've seen looking at some maps of Kuwait. As overall, I was just a lot of research on Google Maps of Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, just wherever else to look for oil sites and get a general idea of what these places should be looking like, and just an idea of the layout, the types of roads to use, that sort of thing. This asset for the guard shack style police station is excellent for a lot of places. It's entrance for like gated communities, or in this case the entrance to an oil district. Yeah, so about Dalluha Big Oil Inc. This is actually one of the few brands so far that the automation game developers have come up with themselves. So this one is definitely canon to the game. And I figured as what's clearly Dalluha's eminent oil producer, it would make sense for them to have some kind of oil field in one of the oil wells, or one of the oil reserves in the Basara area, which in this case I picked a nice corner of the map, just kind of away from everything. I figure at some point the city will eventually stretch out this way, but it's still going to be more or less on the fringes of it. And being so far out, of course, gotta have some worker barracks out here for probably a fair number of foreign workers coming to work in here, probably from Akhana or something like that, just coming to try to make it big in the oil fields of Dalluha, and wanting somewhere nice to stay for the couple of weeks they're going to be working on end and whatever else. And that's what these barracks are for, as well as this maybe a little overkill with the parking, but I mean, it's a wide open desert. Why not fill the space? So I highly recommend the Big Parking Lots mod. It's very versatile because I mean, I do like using the parking lot roads as well, but parking lot roads are a little more limited in the size you can make them and just the general orientation of things. They definitely do have their advantages. They're nice and easy to use and quick to make parking lots, but with the big parking lots, you can definitely get more versatility in terms of shape and layout and whatever else. And there's when you start connecting the roads together as well, at least the parking lot roads, there's less space lost than with the other ones, so you can get a bit more dense of parking without having a bunch of space dedicated to sidewalks or whatever else that's in there. I mean, you can always put trees and stuff on them, but it's still space that could have been used for several more parking spots. Yeah, in this case you get a good amount of density. It's just more work to play around with the stuff and make it look really nice. Even though I'm using roads that don't have lights, still gotta add some lights to the parking lots and stuff like that. It's can't have it too dark out here, after all. So from what I saw looking at maps of oil wells and stuff, is there's definitely a lot going on. You have some warehouses around for product and whatever else, assuming there's no direct pipeline connection anywhere. You've got a lot of oil extraction things. There's potentially some refinement done more or less on site to certain things. It definitely varies from what I've seen, but some of them were pretty intensive, which is basically what I'm doing with this one here. Just a good mix of everything, since that's what the oil industries in the game prefer. And with how remote it is, at least for the moment, I figure instead of running some power lines and pipes and whatnot all the way over to the city, I'd go with the self-contained approach, having a water tower, some power facilities kind of spread around. Just I mean, in reality, I'm pretty sure they burn some of the oil or something to get their power, but you can't really do that in City Skylines. So I'm adding these little transformer things that they add just enough power to get this kind of site going without really breaking the immersion of having some big power plant or anything like that around. It's just this little structure near the power lines, and it's I've used a lot of that in the city itself. It's a great little thing just to have some redundancy, and since massive power plants are usually, well, not always, but a lot of the time they're located somewhere outside the city, and they feed the city through transmission lines, and so it wouldn't make much sense to have some huge power plant somewhere on the map necessarily. I know that's more or less what the game wants you to do, but in reality it's not exactly the most realistic way to go about things. But I will say I do have plans for some kind of gas or oil power plant for Basara, just because it would be really fitting with the oil industry that's going on, and just the sort of thing you can kind of expect to see from an oil-rich metropolis in the desert. Almost forgot the water treatment plant over here. It's definitely a little important for people to be able to flush their toilets. Even for an oil field out here in the desert, a little bit of landscaping is it's a nice addition to have, just to at the least keep some of the sand from flying around too much during during some breeze or anything like that you'd expect way out in the desert like this. Now here I picked up this pipeline asset from the workshop, which is, it comes out being very, very useful for this kind of site because they're not necessarily going to be moving the oil by truck directly from the well to some storage area or whatever, even though that's what they visibly do in the game. In reality, there's definitely a lot of localized pipelines connecting things, and that's what I'm doing with these ones here. And in this moment, I realized that I'm able to lift them up and make them cross roads, so I'm going to change the layout from then on to be able to, have everything nicely unified, crossing over the roads, and really adds to the aesthetic of the oil well that I'm going for. Just that nice level of gritty industrial detailing that just otherwise there's too much empty space, and even though it might be pretty realistic to have a lot of empty space here and there, it does end up kind of boring to see in the game. So adding this kind of thing, it adds to I guess you could call it the excitement of the area. Now we're getting into the fun stuff, adding a direct rail connection to this big oil industry area, because as I showcased at the beginning, I'm only using a small corner of this oil field so far, so it will eventually grow a lot bigger. I'm just kind of, I guess you could consider this phase 1, and this is what I'm starting with, just not be a little too overwhelmed by making this huge thing right from the get-go. So having a train station, it's you don't usually see that out in the Middle East, but this is, of course, a fictional continent, so why not have rail? And why not connect it directly here to have fewer trucks ferrying oil around on the roads? It's just, it'll definitely help to the city run a little better as it grows, and since there's going to be that amount less trucks driving around. And of course more warehouses and getting some different materials stored directly on site just for for the future expansion of the oil industry here as I keep growing it gradually. And the isolated nature of it does require certain services. Of course, I'm adding a little fire station just to be on the safe side in case something catches fire. These sort of places do have their own fire trucks around, so it's little fire stations about the best way to replicate that. And of course, this little helipad for, I guess, any company executives that might be visiting, or rescue helicopters, or whatever might be needed for this oil well. It makes sense to have a nice little helipad on site. Here we are putting in the big oil refinery in the middle of it to really get that nice aesthetic going on of this heavy, gritty oil industry out on the edge of the city. Yeah, so at this point I realized that a larger power station would pretty much be needed here, and I suppose that sort of thing doesn't seem too out of place for this kind of site. Now, another issue that I've started coming into around this point is realizing that I was kind of having a lack of employees, because the city's only so big, and this is adding a huge number of jobs to the area without growing any of the residential areas, which I really should have started with a little more overhead in the residential. So, as you can see with the sudden transition, there's now over 20,000 people here. Kind of took a pause, and I densified a bit of the existing city, which I guess you'll be able to see in the next video eventually. It doesn't look too different, but it's definitely bigger than it was before. So now with that many more employees in the area, I'm able to keep going with the oil industry the way I wanted, and really getting it up and working without half the city going abandoned as people flee their retail jobs just to work in the more lucrative oil wells outside the city. And of course, got some change of ideas with the as far as the storage building goes, right along the highway. So it's a bit of time spent having to set them to empty and just wait for them to clear out. But in the meantime, might as well add some nice new storage facilities out here, a little further from the highway. It's just a little something I figured that a little too close to the highway would probably not be approved should the place catch fire or anything like that. You wouldn't want to have to close all traffic for fear of cars being caught in an explosion or anything. And, overall, this whole facility is fairly close to begin with, but right on the edge of the highway is a little too far. Oh yes, something else to mention is I've realized also at the time I was expanding the city that to get the oil refinery working I needed some metals, and I can't just set a warehouse to import it, so I did put a temporary ore processing place that's just a warehouse for raw ore and a little plant to turn that ore into metal, and so that way it exports directly here, and then the refinery can actually run in some capacity. I'll eventually have to put in some proper ore industry, somewhere in the mountains. Nothing too big. This is mostly an oil city after all, but just a little bit of something somewhere on the kind of the ridge to the southeast of the city. Now, here's what I mentioned earlier with the more spread out oil wells. This is the part of it that is definitely taking more out of reality with having, because in reality the wells, of course, don't just drill straight down. They do spread out to some extent underground, or at least, suck things in, so they're not going to be right next to each other. So in this case, spreading some around, putting some fences around, that's the sort of thing I saw specifically from oil wells when looking at maps, and I figured a lot of this area for both usability and realism, it might as well have some of these spread out, and large area across the highways probably could end up being mostly this kind of thing when I do eventually get to it. Around the big refinery, of course, it makes it's a nice aesthetic to have that density around there of the oil wells and everything, and if it's maybe not the most realistic level of density. It's certainly a balance between the aesthetics of what looks good in this game and for video and things like that, and what ends up looking good, or at least real, in reality. It's in here everything's a little more compact, as you generally expect to see from games. It's just it works much better for playability. And And yeah, so here we are to the end of this episode. It's this is Dalluha Big Oil Inc. Is located just on the outskirts of Basara. It's a very lively oil production facility here. It's got a lot going on, train trucks, it's got storage, refineries, oil extraction, and this is honestly even just a small corner of it, but I gotta end it somewhere, otherwise this episode would end up way too long. So it's just, a little bit of something different to kind of show a little more of my skill set, I guess, for anybody who's not familiar with my normal playing of City Skylines, which that's the first time I put into video. And it's, I figured sticking to old Basara was getting a little too monotonous, so this kind of thing adds a bit of variety. And of course, in the next episode, I will end up back at old Basara, so definitely look forward to that. I'll be, the plan at this point will be to add some kind of a resort area kind of to the edge of what I have right now, and also showcase all the changes that I made off screen in the middle of this video. So as usual, make sure to leave any comments or suggestions down below or in the automation forums thread for this project. It's also linked down below. And yeah, well, goodbye. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.